Hello, everyone, and welcome. Launching a business is one thing, but growing and scaling that business is another thing entirely. Taking a business to the next level not only requires a strong brand vision, but also a team of talented people whose skill sets complement your own. Establishing a set of standardized processes, and yes, plenty of capital. Just ask our panelists. Today, I'm so excited to be joined by a group of entrepreneurs who can share firsthand what it takes to scale, grow a team, and stay on top of cash flow to see your business thrive. So without further ado, let's get into it. Please welcome our panelists. Sashee Chandran, founder and CEO of Tea Drops. Josh Campbell, CEO of Human Improvement. And Gianne Doherty, founder of Organic Bath Company. Thank you all for joining us today. There's so much we want to talk about here today, so let's just dive right in. Sashee, let's start with you. You launched Tea Drops as a direct-to-consumer brand, but you've since expanded your reach through partnerships with big-name retailers like Nordstrom, Neiman Marcus, and Anthropologie. So why did you pursue a direct-to-consumer strategy initially, and how has diversifying your selling points helped you grow and scale Tea Drops into a multi-million-dollar business that it is today?
Yeah, so actually my story is actually a little bit reverse, where I felt I was struggling a lot the first couple of years of figuring out what was the right channel for Tea Drops. This is a brand I started literally in my apartment kitchen. I was making tea drops, with these hands, and then we scaled to a commercial kitchen. And so I was selling in artisan shows, farmers markets, and our actual first big break was getting into Anthropologie, and then subsequently Uncommon Goods and Nordstrom. And so I actually had more of a boutique retail sell through first. And the great thing about that was these retailers would pay, net 30 days or less, or maybe pay immediately. So you would get paid on time. Then you would reinvest that into growing into more retail footprint. We actually didn't really start aggressively pursuing direct to consumer until a few years later. And at that point, I think a couple of things happened. One, I just realized the huge opportunity, especially in the tea industry, which is a very legacy, heritage-driven category, that there weren't a lot of players online, and that we had a huge opportunity to really build out this tea destination of my dreams, which was a community first and an e-commerce experience second. And so I saw this opportunity in white space that no one was really pursuing. And so my skill set at that point, I think, had already been obsolete. Even though I had experience in digital marketing prior to starting Tea Drops, I think that this industry moves so fast. So I just had to reshift and relearn, but also hire the right people who knew what they were doing, who had experience really running a direct consumer business. So that's the next step of what I did, which was just to hire the right people, assemble the right team, and then more aggressively pursue the direct consumer. So now the split, when I first started, was probably 70% retail, 30% direct to consumer. Now that's shifted, where we're about 80% direct to consumer today.
Wow. Now, for all of those people that are starting businesses today, would you recommend a more diversified selling strategy, or sort of taking one at a time? What would you give advice on?
I would. I think it's hard because, you're pursuing so many paths in the beginning. But if COVID has taught us anything last year, it's that to put all your eggs in one basket. It's, obviously, if you put it in the e-commerce basket, that was probably a better bet. But say you were in retail exclusively, that wouldn't have panned out as well. So I'm really initially in the beginning, being omni-channel, trying a bunch of different channels and seeing where your sweet spot is. That's kind of what happened with us. We were in a lot of places, and then we doubled down on the ones that were working well, where we had great margins, and we felt we had the expertise to really accelerate and grow.
Wonderful. Thank you. Josh, we're going to come to you now. And before you launched your own business, Human Improvement, you have built an impressive resume helping companies like Starbucks, Sashee Wellness, and Doherty grow and sell. Now, what advice do you have for new founders and small business owners, and on how to create a unique brand that stands out from the competition? And then separately, how do you create a brand that actually lasts on top of that?
Well, I think the couple things is with each of those you mentioned, Sage to Starbucks to Dosis, they were all in categories that had traditionally not been viewed as terribly appetizing. So if you think back, prior to probably most of our lives, coffee, was never a premium item. You'd never go to a coffee shop per se, especially in North America. And, Starbucks, despite being turned down by hundreds of investors, Howard Schultz really, pushed forward to make his vision a reality. With Sage, we took, a category that's been around forever, literally thousands of years, essential oils, and made it cool and sexy. And, with Dosis, we used the power of brand to transform a pretty stigmatized market, which is the cannabis market. So when when people ask me like, how do I stand out? It's to do something differently, right? I have always put my career into places where generally people tell you you're crazy for the first 1 to 2 years, and that the market's not going to work. You're out of your mind. Those are pretty common things I'm hearing. And until you kind of reach that inflection point, and then people start to brag they knew you early on. So my advice would be to do something different. Like we all have such a finite amount of time in the day. So doing something that actually makes a difference and stands for something is probably the most important thing that you could do. And that will organically help you stand out. In terms of the second part of the question, how does a brand that stands out? There's kind of this massive spectrum of where brands stand. I've seen people usually try and go to a super premium market. And I always don't think that's the right approach in many cases. I think it's, create the brand that works for what you want it to work for. So understanding your customer, understanding what they want, and is somewhat aspirational to them, build that and deliver that great product or service at a compelling price to really create value for them. That's ultimately what helps brands last.
That's great. And now, of course, I'm a brand person, so I'm a believer in the importance of brand. But why do you think a strong brand story is so important when you are looking to grow and scale your business?
Well, I think, it may not have been, 100 years ago, it may not have been as important a case, but now we've got such levels of competition. People, to borrow Simon Sinek's language, people don't buy what you're selling, they buy why you're selling it. And we see that in really every category today. And, unless you're going to compete solely on price, which is certainly an odd approach, but not one that creates an enduring brand, in my opinion, you've really got to be able to weave the brand story into everything you do.
Hear, hear. I agree with that. And having a more purposeful and meaningful brand is more important than ever these days. So thank you for that. Okay, Gianne, you have such a great story. You didn't necessarily set out to launch a beauty brand, but after you actually experienced an allergic reaction to a moisturizer that you used, broke out in hives, and decided you're going to create your own formula for yourself. Tell us, how did actually solving a personal problem grow into the business you have today? And when did you know that organic bath company could break through such a crowded market?
Yeah, so I'll start with the last question first. When I knew it could break into a crowded market was when the orders were not coming in from family and friends. So the more stranger danger sales, as I love to call them, that we were getting, that's when I knew we were onto something. But our first product was a rich body butter, water-free formula. So I was not only solving a problem for sensitive skin, but also those who need rich moisturizers, which in the Northeast, the majority of us do. So our first customers really were our family and friends. Those were the first people we were sharing our products with. They loved them and really encouraged us to get this out on the market.
That's awesome. And now for advice for small business owners that are trying to break into a potentially saturated space and are fearing competition, and what kind of advice would you give them to step in if they're thinking about it?
You really have to keep your blinders on. There's always going to be someone doing something similar. Maybe you feel it's better. You can't be too focused on what your competition is doing. And if you really believe in your why, others will believe. You just have to find your people with your marketing efforts.
Okay, great. All right, everybody, let's get down to business here. So It might seem obvious, but entrepreneurs need to want their business to grow. They have to aspire to have their business grow. Scaling up isn't a goal that every business owner has, but if it is, how should ambitious entrepreneurs start that process? And how do they create an action plan with realistic growth targets to achieve it? That's actually for all of you. So whoever wants to jump in.
Well, I can take a first stab at here. We hear, and I'm sure we all hear this on the panel, people saying, okay, I want to grow. I think understanding why you want to grow is really important. In many cases, if it's a financial reward, that's great, but own it, right? If it's to further your mission, great, but own that. So first of all, that's, in my opinion, one of the key things to start with. And then second is, don't put the cart in front of the horse. I see so many entrepreneurs that get really well funded. And let me tell you, the office looks great. They've got so many staff, but the fundamental business hasn't actually changed. So, always invest behind where you're going. So it should, a lot gets done with a kind of the sawhorse table and that type of kind of entrepreneurial spirit. And there's certain things that will help you scale, like back-end infrastructure. And there's certain things that are really capital intensive, but actually don't help the business grow that much.
I agree with that in the sense that, I bootstrapped Tea Drops as a business for a couple of years, many years before we took any outside funding. And I think that initial piece was critical because you are learning, like you are actively learning what works for your business, what product sets work, what channels work. And you're learning on your own dime. It's like an education. And there are a lot of mistakes that happen and you are figuring a lot out and you're figuring out the unit economics of your business and so many other things. And so to take capital in too prematurely, you then don't really have that time or space to figure a lot of this out, to learn on your own dime. You have a certain level of pressure that I think is different. And so I think and I really agree with Josh that you have to you have to kind of get down to your why, and also what kind of business do you want to grow? And it's okay if you want to have a lifestyle business or just, run this independently, or maybe you want to keep this as like a generational business just in the family, and, kind of keep the entire ownership of it. Or maybe you do want to accelerate it and grow fast and maybe eventually have it be acquired one day. I think all of those are fine and realistic paths, but they all have a very different financing journey and also implication on your lifestyle. And so I think those need to be, just as much considered and weighed out. But I do think that, bootstrapping in the beginning, to me, when people ask advice on taking capital earlier, et cetera, I really think that is such a great discipline because you have to learn, right, with your own dollars to be very frugal and very mindful of your decisions. And so if people see that as, also that's kind of traction for people to see too, how you might handle their money if they're to give you capital.
Yeah, I agree with Sashee. What is that growth going to cost you? And are you willing to pay that cost? We are still 100% self-funded 6 years in. And that continues to be a very conscious decision for our business, as well as the sacrifices that go along with that, right? Us as the owners, my business partners, my fiance, we are the last to get paid and we're probably the lowest to get paid in the company, but we still own 100% of it. So be realistic with that growth. If you don't take on money and you're not necessarily innovating, you may not have really fast growth, right? You're going to penetrate the market slower, but maybe it's deeper. Maybe your customers are more loyal. So, for me, I think number one is surround yourself with people smarter than you. Talk to mentors who have gone down the path you're going down. Talk to mentors who made other decisions and can push your thinking.
That's great. All right, now I'm going to actually turn to Josh, right? I think you have hit your 1 year mark recently. Congratulations. And you've helped many big brands scale and sell. Can you walk us through the differences of where you were when you launched versus where you are in your business today?
Yeah, so we literally coming up with the 1 year anniversary when we pulled the team together. So we've been in market for the better part of 6 months, but really the push came literally the week before Los Angeles shut down, we flew our entire team in to kick off this project. So we were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and we're building a brand that was designed to win the shelf. I mean, we built human improvement to be on shelf, not online. So we had to do a massive pivot over to scale up our D2C business and our Amazon business to be able to really ensure we are getting the product into the hands of the consumer. So that's been a fundamental shift for us. Now coming into the year, it's been remarkable seeing how consumers have been purchasing, and now they're moving back into shopping, which is that when there was this fear mindset early on, there was, I think, denial and then fear, and now we're seeing consumers feel a little more confidence. These checks are coming, and now people are saying, okay, I'm actually going to try a new product. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. So we're seeing a very different business than we had envisioned, but one that is very exciting.
Gosh, you started at the most challenging time. But wonderful that you were able to pivot the business that way and that quickly. So congrats again, Sashee. It takes more than a founder to build a successful business. You need a team of people, certainly with diverse skill sets that complement your own. So how do you attract that, top tier talent who believe in your mission? What do you look for in an employee, and, what's your interview process? So a couple of questions in there.
Yeah, I think there's a different stage of recruiting talent. I think at different phases of your business. I think that, there's this narrative around always hiring the top tier talent that you can find, like only A+ players, right? And I think the reality of that when you're just funding yourself or bootstrapping is that you don't have the funds to hire like A+ talent. Like that's just the reality of it. So I really think that can be a confusing narrative that's out there, because I think that there's, when you're first starting out and you just need bodies to help package and do certain foundational work, I call them Band-Aid solutions, because they are there for a certain season. And they're not going to necessarily be permanent hires, but you need them to get to the next milestone of whatever that is for your business. And then once you kind of mature, I think that there's a point at which you're like, okay, I need to increase my skill set. I also, also assessing what you really like working on in the business, because there's some things in the business I actually hate working on. And I need to kind of focus on the things I like to do, because that's how I get my point of inspiration. That's how I keep going. And so for me, that was the operational logistics related to my business. And that's just not my skill set. That's not something I actually want to spend time doing. So that was my first significant hire. And I took a lot of time. That was very important to me. So I took time. It was the first time I actually engaged in a recruiter to help. And even though it seemed like a big cost up front, their network and their expertise in finding the right person was worth it to me at the end of the day. And in terms of retaining, that same employee has been with Tea Drops for now 3.5, 4 years. So we have a very great retention rate on employees, because, for me, I just think as a founder or CEO, it's like your main job is really to serve them, right? Assess what their needs are. Obviously, you're growing and building the ship together, but their voice and their needs matter above anyone else. And I think when you do that, that kind of trickles down to providing a really amazing customer service. Everyone seems to fare well when they are the priority. So that's a little bit of how I think about it.
Makes sense. And now actually to Gianne, right? Now to talk about something that I would not love to do if I was owning my own business, and it's process. But process is key if a startup is going to scale up effectively, and it can make or break a company. So it is critical, especially in the early stages. So what advice do you have on establishing and maintaining a process as you scale, while keeping in mind the importance of flexibility that's needed as you expand?
Yep, and this is also my least favorite part of the business as well. But systematize as much as possible, so that whether you're onboarding 5 new wholesalers or 20 new wholesalers, you have that process down pat. We actually experienced quite a bit of growth in the past year, thank goodness. So grateful for that. Definitely hand washing and hand sanitizers. They helped us stay in business and grow. And so we learned really on which systems had to be updated, which needed to be improved, and really honed that. So now as the larger retailers are calling, we're confident that we can take them on. And we do everything internally. We ship weekly, we make our products, and it's not been an issue as we're experiencing significant growth.
Great. Okay, now this is for all of you, actually. Mastercard actually is so passionate about giving small businesses access to programs like something we do called Digital Doors, where we pull together a full set of resources, tools, even a digital diagnostic to give a business a sense of what's needed to get done. And then here's the tools that go with it, from cybersecurity to just getting your payments, getting e-payments going. But what are some of the tools you found really helpful in your journey of owning a business? And then what's worked, what hasn't worked? And I throw it out to any of you.
Well, I can jump off there. So I think there's a million, tools are something there's certainly a lot of in the world. I think the amount there are out there actually makes it more challenging. There's actually too much choice in many cases. So what I found, or the advice I'll give around that, is to talk to other entrepreneurs and find out what are the top 3 things they're using, and continue to ask those questions, and you'll see a lot of similarities between them. One of the tools I'll quote unquote call it is probably the most valuable is actually taking time. And that means, I call it balcony time, but it's taking a Friday afternoon off with your team, going for a walk, talking, getting out. All the best ideas come out that almost all the problems are solved that way, not necessarily on Zoom meetings, not in organized meetings, but in taking that space and allowing just some room to breathe.
Sure. I'm sure some of the best thinking happens when you could just take that moment, for sure. Anyone else?
I love that. And now I want to go take a walk with my team. I'm going to schedule it and be like, I had a great idea, guys. We love Asana for project management. It helps keep everyone accountable and honest. Gusto, our payroll system, has grown with us. It's so easy to use and understand. ShipStation for all of our orders has been a blessing. In the past year, we've been on Good Morning America and The View, and that has kept it all together. So I think those are the top 3 that I'm thinking of right now.
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of the similar tools that we use. I would say Slack is kind of our lifeline for instant communication. And we've kind of had tiers of different kinds of communication tools depending on what the need is. Whether it's email, our Trello boards is how we keep track of our projects. All the whole Google Suite has been pretty essential. Shopify, can't say enough about the Shopify. Just everything related to their platform, the different apps that are now available, and really building, customizing your site experience. We've now been testing out things like Deliver, which is like same day delivery, Afterpay, so people can, pay in increments. There's a host of things that I think are really valuable tools, and everything's unique to your business. But I would say those foundational ones like Slack, Trello, Asana,
I love Afterpay. Even as a consumer, I'm never going to pay the full price if Afterpay is an option. I don't care if it's like splitting up $10 4 ways. I'm going to do it. Yeah,
it's pretty game changing. So you think of these little things, you don't they just optimize your site experience. And I could go on and on. We have so many other things.
Create more reasons to make the purchase, right?
Yeah. You just want less friction as possible, right? During your shopping experience.
Okay, great. So now we're going to transition. We're going to talk about some challenges. Scaling a business isn't free. I'm sure you all wish it was. Most growth plans require hiring staff, investing in new technology, facilities, spending on reporting systems, tools like you just talked about, things that help you measure results and make decisions better. So how do you find the money to invest in growth? Can you guys share some of the funding options that you have leveraged and explain why it worked or didn't work for you.
I don't mind jumping in first for any other bootstrapping entrepreneurs out there. Don't forget that sales is, investment in your business. So pre-orders, running discounts, that's a way to get money in. Shopify Capital, small business loans, and, also knowing you can't do everything at once. So really looking at the dollars and making sure that it makes sense.
Yeah, I think it.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say it depends. Obviously, if you're intending to bootstrap the business or finance it else, alternatively with venture capital, angel investment, etc. I think bootstrap wise, there actually are a lot of amazing programs now, like Clearbank. So that's a loan where you can spend on digital advertising or other marketing apps as well, or services. We've used Shopify Capital before. There is for our food and bev industry, Gourmet Growth Capital, Dwight Capital. You can even crowdfund something or do crowdfund investments on Republic and WeFunder. There are just many ways, right, to alternatively get the capital you need, which I think is exciting and definitely changes the game where investment may not be needed. And then if you want to go the investment route, a book I highly recommend to just learn about the foundations of how to read a term sheet, what's the difference between a convertible note and equity raise, is Venture Deals by Brad Feld. I think there's another author a co-author to that, but it was really instrumental when I was first learning about how to navigate that space. But that definitely is an option. Obviously changes what your trajectory might be for the business. So it's something to think about. It took about a year to really think about it before I ended up going that route.
Just to add to that, I completely agree with everything that's been said. I'll push it one step further. And what we found to be really successful before we even launched Human Improvement was we went to our suppliers and negotiated terms out of the gate. So in a D2C business, you get paid, 1 to 3 days through your merchant. And we actually negotiated 90-day terms with our suppliers. So our goal before we even launched was to invert the cash cycle. That worked in some cases, not always in others. But you'd be surprised at how many suppliers will say yes to give you a little bit of term on it to really help you out. Because that's the most critical piece. Is usually for most entrepreneurs that have a product-based business, it's financing inventory. That's a big, quite frankly, poor use of cash if you can avoid it. So, negotiate and see what you can get with your supplier to give you a little bit of space to really get going.
Oh, that's a perfect pivot to Gianne, who I was going to ask about the product-based business and how you establish and maintain a solid supply chain when it comes to scaling that kind of a business. So how do you identify manufacturers and distributors you work with and share any learnings that you've had along the way?
Yeah. So we, again, kind of always ask in our network, do you recommend someone for this? Do you recommend someone for that? We learned last year that we had to have backups for our manufacturers and our partners, backups on backups. One challenge that I can share is I'm sure we all remember when everyone was frantically looking for hand sanitizers. And we quickly moved up hand sanitizers to a new product launch. And we could not get 2-ounce jars to save our lives. And I remember my partner had a call with one of our distributors. And the person said, hey, I have 100,000 units of these available. He called back 20 minutes later, only 30,000 were available. And for us, to talk about inventory, we make product fresh weekly. So we were not in the habit as a small business of keeping so much in inventory. That just felt uncomfortable for us financially. But, we had to be like, F it, let's buy the 1,000 units. And, looking back with 2020 hindsight, pun intended, I would have gone all in. I would have been like, get 500,000 if we can, and let's push this out.
Yeah. Oh, That's great. And actually, so the same thing, that's a good pivot over to Sashee as well, because, when you talk about those kinds of challenges, Gianne, with, dealing with not only inventory, how do you stock the inventory that now you have all these units on the back end, and certainly it has to have an impact on increased customer service requests and more. So Sashee, can you share with us how you deal with sudden spikes in sales, and how do you prepare for that scaling when it has to happen so quickly and sustainably?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I actually don't think we have this piece really figured out. We have a pretty seasonal business. So, our tea drops are really meant for the hot tea season as a replacement to the tea bag. So you can imagine during fall, that's kind of when things start escalating, and through the holidays, it's like crazy, the spike. So we try to account for that by, increasing our seasonal staff, whether it's customer service, et cetera. I don't think we could have predicted all of the challenges that came with last year in 2020. If you were an e-commerce business, then you relied on USPS, you probably had a nightmare of a season working through those issues, increased customer service inquiries. And so we rely on tools like Gorgeous and Tone for immediate SMS and communication. So that, those are some tools that I think have been really helpful in navigating. And there's another one, maybe it'll come to me, that we use for social media responses as well. We hired on seasonal staff as much as we could, but we just had to also deal with the reality. There was at one point, the team was like almost at a breaking point and in tears, because we just had such an inbound of inquiries, and it just did not seem like it was going down. But I think you just have to give yourself a little bit of grace. And we asked our customers to give us grace. There were so many things in Q4 that were out of our control, and during this pandemic, and shipment delays and warehouse delays. So I think that it's not always going to look perfect, and I think that's okay. You're learning and growing with it. But the tools I mentioned are great tools that really help on the customer service side, if you guys want to look into it.
Great. And Josh, of course, another thing that comes to mind, we talked marketing before, but certainly you want people to get to know, love, and trust your brand. But it is a pay-to-play world. So how can small business owners create buzz, but yet deal with the budgets they may have? Do you have some advice and best practices you could share?
Well, I think we've all made Google and Facebook a heck of a lot of money here in the last year as we've moved to digital, and you're seeing CACs skyrocket right now. So my advice would be do things differently. Some of the best campaigns I've ever seen cost next to nothing. So if folks want to do a quick Google and do the Shreddy's Diamond, that's one of my favorite campaigns of all time. I won't explain it here, but just give it a Google. Amazing campaign, costs nothing. I think what Domino's is doing is really innovative with their pothole campaign. They're all examples of doing things differently, and they all have different budgets attached. But I think that's the core, is what's unique, what's fun, and what engages the community. Those will always trump just throwing money at it. Because listen, no small business is ever going to compete with the capital behind a major CPG company. So why even try, right? What you can do is pivot and do things differently that pushes the envelope a little bit that the big guys are afraid to do.
I love that. When you get engagement and people care, then you earn media. And that's so important, that every dollar earns you a multiple, right? That you put into marketing. So that's great. Okay, now for all of you, and you talked a little bit about this already, but, because of COVID specifically, business owners like yourselves have been challenged to kind of throw out the playbooks, change where you were going, and think outside the box. And in fact, we did a survey here at Mastercard, and over 2/3 of small business owners agreed that one upside to the pandemic is that it actually prompted them to upgrade their digital or their e-pay solutions. And also the survey said that 81% of people said this has actually improved customer satisfaction levels. So I'd love to know, you talked about some of these digital first changes you've made to your business. What learnings can you share with us? Go ahead, Josh.
I'll jump in on this one, since we really started with a brick and mortar first strategy here. And it's really, for us, it was going heavy social. getting great community involvement to help share that. We also launched Afterpay, and I was genuinely shocked to see how many people, for a relatively low price point item, were using Afterpay. So that was absolutely critical, and really for us, taking away all the friction points. So obviously Shopify has crushed it, amazing partner for pretty much every small business today, I think. Those two elements, I think, have made a massive change, at least for us.
Also, gorgeous, I never know how to say it, gorgeous, as Sashee said, was really good for us to stay on top of our customer service, because there were some balls dropped there as more inquiries came in. So that has helped us stay on top of it.
Great.
Yeah, I'm thinking of other digital tools that were game changing for us this year. I would say, we actually launched our first subscription program this past year. So Recharge was a great partner for us for that. And honestly, just enhancing the site experience was critical for us. So, I know that we required our own developer, et cetera, but we spent a lot of time, just because D2C was the focus this past year, at really enhancing the site experience, its storytelling on your site, et cetera. And then obviously all the other things I mentioned, like Afterpay, upsells too. Like, it's surprising how many people, if you just propose like a $5 upsell of something, people adopt and convert to that. So that was really interesting to see.
This is, what you've all done is critical, because we see it in our research too. And people are telling us that even, post-pandemic, they're going to continue to use digital, because now, they see the convenience in it. So more and more digital transactions are actually happening. And it's great that everybody should be upgrading their businesses, because this is the trend and where it will stay post-pandemic. So before we run out of time, let's move on to a little bit more advice as well. And I'm going to stay with Sashee right there. When you're running a business, you have to fall in love with the numbers. So what are some of the hardest money lessons you've learned along the way as you tried to scale? Any tips or tricks that you can help us on?
I think it's really, for us, like, we've always kept a P&L that we update, profit and loss projections, just based on estimations of the business. So we look at each channel and we see, okay, can we predict based on last quarter sales where we think we'll land? And we basically make a budget according to that. And I think a lot of small business owners might be scared of that process, but honestly, once you get through it and do it, you feel this like sense of relief. So I think, having an accountant or someone help you who's more financially sound is definitely helpful. And there's some great tools if you are focusing online that are great to kind of just help with the metrics. An app I use a lot is called Lifetimely. And it basically showcases the LTV of your customer, their retention, if they're on subscription, what that looks like, all of the amazing metrics, AOV, CAC, like you name it, has it listed there. Love that app. It's tied to Shopify. And there's also other ones like Glue, GLEW. I find that's also really helpful. And then we just switched to one called Dacity, DAASITY, which is another basically metrics dashboard that you can customize and make different types of reports. But Shopify's reporting as well is also getting more robust. So these are things that I just think you have to personally decide that you are going to be versed in the unit economics of your business. You're going to really pay attention to your gross margin. You are going to really pay attention to your COGS. And as Josh said, be evaluated, try to negotiate with some of your suppliers. These are inherently important to business. So it's just creating a discipline around it. But some of the tools I mentioned have been super helpful for us.
That's great. So Josh's suggestion on, negotiating payment terms is a great one. Now, any other advice from any of you on how to stay on top of cash flow and keep your business in the positive?
Give yourself a buffer. This is family friendly, so I'll say stuff will happen. Whenever I talk to, I advise a lot of companies that are just starting out, and before they launch, they always say, "Oh, this is so hard." And the advice is, you haven't seen anything yet. Like this is easy. So ensuring you've got some buffer, because you will have days you think the world's coming to an end. You've got to have a little bit in your war chest there. So always give yourself some slack on the line.
All of that.
You got it. You got it. Actually, I'm going to then go right back to Josh and ask, when you're scaling a business and you have to start raising that capital at some point, what advice do you have to share with us on the approach to that process? What types of people are important to have at your cap table?
So really good question. This is probably a 4 or 5 hour long answer, but I'll try and answer very quickly for you. Again, it comes back to what do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish? Are you building a business to crush some numbers and sell it in a couple of years? Or are you building a business to transform the world that you're never going to exit? Right? Those have material impacts on the type of people you get in. But as a general theme, people that can add more than capital to your cap table. So what we've done, I can share a direct example is I've been really fortunate to be able to capitalize our businesses myself. But I realized I've got some big blind spots. So what I did is assemble a board of advisors to basically help me and my team identify our blind spots. And we allowed them to invest a little bit along that. Right now, capital is pretty inexpensive. We're seeing some of the lowest interest rates in our lifetimes. So it's not about the cost of capital, but it's about the kind of the emotional cost you can get with it. So the long-winded way of saying, get people that really want the business and you to win at the same time and can help you identify some of those blind spots rather than just folks that are writing a check.
Got it. Yeah, there's probably a full day seminar on this topic alone, right? Gianne, we've established that scaling a business isn't easy, right? And learning from others' mistakes can help ensure we don't do the same. Can you recall a specific time when something went wrong as you scaled, and how did you turn it around?
Yeah, something goes wrong weekly, used to be daily. And so much was out of our control in the past year. And I think our lesson is, as uncomfortable as it is, or even if you don't think it's your fault, communicate to your customer, over communicate to your customer. So I think a prime example is shipping with USPS. They were struggling all of last year, and we would get customer emails sometimes where I'm like, do you read the news? Do you know what's going on? This is not our fault. But, we came up with a really lovely email where, when it's out of our hands, it's in the USPS. They are struggling right now. If it doesn't show up in the next 5 business days, we will happily replace your product. And then, even with the hand sanitizers, the jars, we had about 4 different jars for the hand sanitizers because one would sell out. So you have to get the other one. So explaining to our customers that hey, there's a worldwide shortage in our supply chain right now. So they're not going to look like the picture, but it's the same amazing, sanitizer.
That's great. All right. So you are all clearly problem solving, literally on the fly all the time. But what do you do when you actually don't know how to do something?
Oh, I can only speak for myself on this, but that happens pretty regularly. I think 6 or 7 times already this morning that's come up. I ask. I used to be the youngest person on my teams, and now I'm one of the oldest people on my team. So there's a lot I learn every single day. But if we all knew the answer, first of all, I don't think anything else would be an entrepreneur. If we all knew the answers, we know how hard it is to get into it. But asking for help and don't be ashamed about it. And ask probing questions. Some of the best entrepreneurs I know ask the best questions.
Yeah, I would say I think I didn't spend enough time building I was kind of operating in isolation in my house, and I didn't know any other people of who, I knew people in tech, but I didn't know anyone who's really doing a CPG, startup or had a related company. So I think I missed out a lot on really creating those founder relationships early on. And I've actually learned more from other business owners. Even today, I picked up at least 4 things I want to implement on just listening to you two. So I think learning from other founders has truly been one of the greatest opportunities I've had. And I think creating those networks early on has been super beneficial.
Same, your network is invaluable.
Yeah, critical. We constantly hear that. Anything to do to help bring people together like today, and network is critical. Okay, we are going to go into rapid fire finishers here as we move into our close. So these are for all of you, and just jump in. Here we go. My typical workday starts with
walking my dog.
Tea.
Human improvement smoothie.
Oh, you guys are so good. You're better than me. I should have said a shower, but nighttime shower.
Oh, my number one tip for scaling a business is
passion.
Persistence.
Do what you can where you are with what you have.
Right. Leading a team requires
empathy.
Humility.
Oh my God, those are two I was going to take. Willingness to admit you're wrong.
Right. My go-to interview question for prospective hires is,
do you like dogs?
What do I ask that's different? It depends on what the role is, but I do, I spend time like also asking why, why Tea Drops, why this company? Because I think that piece is really important for us.
I always ask what the candidate, how they would define success in the role.
And my definition of success is
owning my time.
I think for me, it's this sense of equanimity, like that nothing that happens exciting or not so great can really disrupt this kind of inner, you can call it inner peace or just inner, I guess my sense of peace.
For me, it's seeing those on my team become successful, ideally with the organization, and sometimes they go on to crush it in somewhere else, and that's awesome to see.
Okay, well, first of all, let me thank all of you. You are just amazingly inspiring and just are incredible. And it's been great conversation, and I really appreciate you sharing your insights and knowledge with all of us today. And I also want to give a special thank you to everyone who's joining us virtually from home. I hope you took away some valuable learnings from today's conversations. I know that I definitely did. Don't forget to check out all the great programming you have access to today. There's so much information you don't want to miss. And thank you again for joining. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.